The 60s. A decade that rocked America to its core. With racial tensions at an all-time high, a group of college students, frustrated with the society around them, rose up and created an organization. Through its efforts, this organization encountered a number of triumphs and tragedies, and would become to be known as the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee.
In 1960, Ella Baker, a student at Shaw University in North Carolina, created the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee after observing the lack of student representation present in national civil rights groups like the SCLC. Even though the conference only had 126 people in attendance, SNCC grew quickly as it began to fight for civil rights. They, said Baker, are seeking to rid America of the scourges of racial segregation and discrimination, not only at lunch counters, but in every aspect of life. This sentiment was harbored throughout many Southern schools, and it accelerated change nationwide. Most of these colleges involved were historically black colleges, like Spelman and Morehouse in Atlanta, Claflin College in South Carolina, and Fisk University in Tennessee. These college students eagerly sought for change in the community, and through SNCC, the young and furious set out to change the landscape of segregationist America.
At the time of its founding, SNCC aimed to end the apathy towards the desegregation of lunch counters and other spaces through direct action protest while paying little attention to voter registration as part of their efforts. Only after the Kennedy administration expressed their dissatisfaction of these protests and sit-ins did organizers expand their mission towards increased turnout at the polls as well. This debate grew to be the first hurdle SNCC faced in maintaining unity. Whether direct action protest or voter registration should be the focus of the committee. This question nearly split SNCC in 1961, but through Baker's intervention, the decision was made to create two parts of SNCC, the direct action wing and the voter registration wing.
The direct action wing of SNCC was heavily involved in peaceful protests and demonstrations. As per their original intentions, SNCC often protested against restaurants that served whites only, through sit-ins where members would sit at lunch counters and refuse to move until served. Unlike other protests of the time, these sit-ins were fully organized by energetic and passionate students. For example, Atlanta students began staging sit-ins at Rich's department store in downtown Atlanta. Many students were present, and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. joined SNCC on this occasion. Unfortunately, most of the protesters were tragically arrested and subjected to unfair and harsh treatment by the police as a result of their nonviolent protest. However, this protest sparked negotiations between African American leadership, Rich's management, and government employees of Atlanta, and in March of 1961, they announced that Atlanta would be desegregated, a major milestone for civil rights in the South, and a testament to SNCC's legitimacy through nonviolence in the civil rights movement.
In the 1963 March on Washington, SNCC joined with other civil rights groups of the era, and Chairman John Lewis railed against the federal government for not doing enough. He made it very clear that SNCC would not be quiet about the injustice that plagued America. SNCC was also involved in the march from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama, where on Bloody Sunday, protesters were confronted by deadly violence from local authorities on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. This event sparked national outrage due to its broadcast on TV, and because it was visible nationwide, all of America could see the horrors of racism.
The voter registration wing of SNCC focused their efforts on political representation and tried to end the racist restrictions of the time. They advocated against literacy tests, poll taxes, and other common disenfranchisements of the black vote. Additionally, they went door to door, encouraging their neighbors and fellow civil rights activists to participate in elections. In coordination with the NAACP, SNCC helped to make a major change in Southern voting demographics. These groups also rallied to help the passage of the Voting Rights Act in 1965.
As part of our project, we interviewed Dr. Nafisa Muhammad, a professor of history at Spelman College in Atlanta who is acquainted with some SNCC members. She described how many students in their teens and 20s fought so that they could ensure civil rights for all, aware that it may cost them their lives. Additionally, she noted the big role that women played. They made flyers, pamphlets, and other important documents, meanwhile taking high-level positions in the Get Out to Vote movement. For example, Ruby Doris Smith Robinson, the administrative secretary of SNCC, and Diane Nash, female students in SNCC, organized successful Atlanta student sit-ins and Get Out to Vote initiatives.
In order for nonviolence to work, your opponent must have a conscience. The United States has none.
In 1965, Stokely Carmichael began to rise in power in SNCC as one of the youngest leaders in the history of the organization. In 1966, Carmichael took over as chairman and began a major change in SNCC's philosophy. Stokely Carmichael decided that nonviolence was not the way SNCC should go about its operations. Peaceful protests were no longer an option for its members.
He began to advocate for more radical ideas, like moving away from nonviolence, militarization, and even expelling white members from the committee, ideas concurrent with the Black Power movement popularized by him and the Black Panther Party.
Ultimately, his leadership through these ideals led to the demise of the once great committee. In 1968, Carmichael's successor, H. Rap Brown, furthered the radicalization of SNCC, removing the nonviolent from its longtime name and changing it to the Student National Coordinating Committee. This represented the gravitation away from nonviolent tendencies that were once the tenet of SNCC.
During his reign as chairman, SNCC became a target of the counterintelligence program of the FBI, who wanted to crush all black militancy. Tensions grew between blacks and whites when the SNCC youth became armed, and this also led to their estrangement from more moderate civil rights groups and the loss of financial backing. Eventually, the strain became too much. Pressure from outside forces like the government and internal conflicts led to the disintegration of SNCC's ability to sustain a cohesive protest movement. By 1970, the group had disbanded, ending an era of student activism. It is a true tragedy SNCC's legacy is clouded by strife and controversy. SNCC is remembered by historians as one of the more radical civil rights groups of the era. Their infamous sit-ins and freedom rides are sometimes perceived as being too extreme and too disruptive. Their final years cemented this belief. To many, these years were a stain upon their memory. Throughout the time under Carmichael and Brown, SNCC's adoption of radicalization and militarism betrayed the movement to many by not adhering to the principles of peace.
While there were many obstacles that SNCC faced throughout its existence, the organization made countless achievements in the civil rights movement. This passionate group of young students was behind multiple movements that will forever impact our country. Through their protests and direction in movements like the Rich's Department Store sit-ins, Selma March, and March on Washington, our nation came closer to equality. Additionally, SNCC's grassroots actions, such as the Get Out to Vote initiatives among blacks, forever changed the demographics of voter turnout. Students today can learn so much from what SNCC offered to America on behalf of the younger generation. Movements today, like the Never Again movement in 2018, show that SNCC's tactics can still make significant change. The adherence to nonviolence by SNCC during its initial years shows that by nonviolently protesting, the youth of America can have their voice heard. However, their story also stands as a caution to future generations about the consequences of resorting to violence to achieve their goals. It's important that all remember SNCC's story and the legacy it leaves that affects everybody. No matter what, we can learn from SNCC's triumphs and tragedies. We can strive to adhere to their greatest triumph, change through peaceful protest, and we can hope that the aggressiveness that SNCC took will never happen again, whether they be student-led or not.
The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee overcame many, and then some.